I've been a teacher for quite a long time now, and I've always worked in boarding schools for girls. In the schools that I've worked in, even though I'm a primary school teacher and I've worked in the primary department, our schools have had girls from kindergarten right through to year 12. And some of the girls that I've had in as young as year 4 have actually been boarders. So I know a little bit about what it's like to be at boarding school. I didn't go to boarding school. I went to a public school and had a fantastic time when I was a student, which is a lot of why I became a teacher. But boarding school is different. It's interesting that you don't go home for an entire term in many cases. Some girls, their parents might come down during the term and take them out, but generally you have to stay at school for the whole term. So it is very different to going to day school. Boarding school is great because you get to hang out with your friends all the time after school, and there's always loads of activities. So the girls at the boarding school that I work at now, they do things like dancing and tennis and all sorts of sports, and they might even do fencing and gymnastics. So there's always something going on. The other interesting thing about boarding school is that the girls all do their homework together, and that's called prep time. And so they go to prep and they have teachers who help them. Sometimes they go to prep in the library, and sometimes they have prep in their boarding houses. And the boarding houses, that's another interesting thing about boarding school. Boarding houses can vary. Sometimes you can have rooms where you might have 6 girls all bunking in together. And then when the girls get a lot older and their study is a bit more serious, usually there's only probably 2, and there's sometimes even 1 girl in each room. So the boarding houses are a bit like a big sleepover. In our boarding houses at the school that I work at now, the girls in our year 7 boarding have a guide dog puppy that they raise for a whole year, and every year we have a new guide dog puppy. And they also have a pet rabbit, which is pretty fun that they get to look after some pets. We have a couple of cats that wander around the school, and we also have some other house mistresses who have dogs, and our headmistress has a couple of dogs too, so pets are certainly allowed at boarding school. At another boarding school that I worked at, the girls used to have horses at school as well. So I suppose a lot of my inspiration for Alice-Miranda comes from the fact that I've worked in that environment and I know a bit about what boarding school life is like. Would I like to go to boarding school? I think if I had my time again as a student, probably I would like to go to boarding school because I can see lots of fun. The fantastic thing about boarding school is that girls make friends for life, and you can see that in the job that I work in at the moment. I look after, I do some work with our old girls, and to see old girls who have known each other since they were maybe 8, 10, 12 years old and who've been boarding school together, and they still get together sometimes 50 and 60 years after they finish school is just fantastic. Alice-Miranda's first adventure starts when she goes to boarding school at Winchesterfield-Downsfordvale Academy for proper young ladies. When she arrives, although everything looks perfect and the grounds are beautiful and the buildings are fantastic and it looks like it has everything that a school would ever want to have, Alice-Miranda gets a strange feeling that something isn't quite right. She meets several people not long after she arrives at school, and each of them is upset about something. She meets the cook, Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith is miserable because she's never been allowed to take a holiday. She meets Jacinta Headlington-Bear, the school's second best tantrum thrower, who's having an almighty tantrum in the gymnasium because she's not allowed to go to the gymnastics championships. And she meets the gardener and Mr. Charles. And Mr. Charles is miserable because the school has no flowers anymore. Alice-Miranda decides that she needs to talk to the headmistress, Miss Ophelia Grimm, at once and remedy these problems, because that's part of her personality and part of her character is that she's a problem solver. When she goes to meet Miss Grimm, she quickly learns that Miss Grimm hasn't seen any students in over 10 years. Well, of course, that intrigues Alice-Miranda even more, and she thinks, that's it, I need to go and visit her straight away. She needs to know what's going on in her school. Alice-Miranda and Miss Grimm do meet. It's not pretty. So Miss Grimm sets Alice-Miranda a series of challenges that she must undertake and that she must pass for her to be able to stay at the school, all based on the fact that because Alice-Miranda is only 7 1/4, she's really too young to be there. And Miss Grimm says she doesn't know how she was allowed to go there in the first place. So, apart from Miss Grimm's challenges, Alice-Miranda has another pretty big challenge ahead of her in the form of a girl called Alethea Goldsworthy, who is a very nasty bully. Alethea believes that she runs the school, and in fact, Alethea becomes the head girl or the head prefect at the school because Miss Grimm only knowing the kids from a distance, believes that Alethea is a really good girl. Alice-Miranda has loads of challenges to overcome, and in her feisty manner, in her positive way, she has some really, really good outcomes, and there's loads of fun to be had along the way with her special friend Millie. Alice-Miranda's second adventure happens when she's on holiday at home. Alice-Miranda takes Jacinta Headlington-Bear, the school's second best tantrum thrower, home for the holidays, and together the girls stumble upon some pretty interesting mysteries. There's a stranger, there's a new boy on the estate who's very cranky and causing all sorts of mischief, and they need to get to the bottom of what's going on. In Alice-Miranda's third adventure, Alice-Miranda takes the lead. She finds herself back at school again, and this time there's a school play. For the very first time in many, many years, the girls are getting together with a boys' school from on the other side of the village, and the boys' school is called Fail School for Boys, which is a pretty silly name for a boys' school, but if you read the story, you'll understand why it's called that. Anyway, there's also a legend of a witch in the woods, and true to form, Alice-Miranda, well, she meets the witch in the woods, and you'll have to read it to see what happens next.